Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's Susan Kaufman. I'm here to introduce our speaker today for Attitudes Weekly ADHD Experts broadcast. We'll be talking with Dr. Sharon Saline about building executive functions in your child with ADHD. Dr. Saline is going to be talking with us about some really practical solutions for teaching emotional regulation, organization, and working memory during the summer months, which are a great time. And so when instead of inundating your child with reminders or arguments about homework or chores, Dr. Saline will be talking about strategies for choosing mutual goals and building lasting skills for independence, including things such as how to identify triggers, reduce meltdowns, how to improve working memory skills, simple practical organization skills, and lots more. So we're really pleased to have Dr. Saline back. She's one of our favorite speakers and favorite writers at Attitude. I want to tell you a bit about her. She is has a doctorate in clinical psychology, and she has more than 30 years experience as a top expert in ADHD, in anxiety and learning differences, and decades of both academic excellence and clinical experience. In her practice, she works with families as they navigate the whole maze of diagnoses that they confront, and she helps them with successful interventions and connections. She has a wonderful new book, which I want to recommend to all of you, called What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, Working Together to Empower Kids for Success in School and in Life. This has been heralded as an invaluable resource and is recipient of several highly acclaimed awards. You can learn much more about Dr. Saline at her website, drsharonsaline.com, and she's also on Facebook at drsharonsaline.com. So, Dr. Saline, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. We look forward to this. I want to also thank the sponsor of our webinars. As you guys know, we are really happy to offer our webinars at no cost to anyone, and that is thanks to our sponsors, including Omega Bright. For this webinar, Omega Bright 70-10MD is a proprietary high-concentrate omega-3 formulation. It was developed by Dr. Carol Locke while she was on the faculty at Harvard Medical School. It has been extensively clinically tested and demonstrated to reduce anxiety in healthy medical students in an NIH-funded, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial. And you can order it now exclusively at omegabright.com. So Omega Bright, maker of proprietary omega-3s and a sponsor of Attitude, thank you so much. As always with Attitude's broadcast, Dr. Saline is going to present her slides and then take as many questions as we can have time for. Just before she starts, we'd just like to ask you the age of your child with ADHD. You'll see a poll pop up there on your screen. And just tell us the age of your child. And while you're taking the poll, let me just tell you a few things about the webinar console itself and a new feature that we're offering as of this webinar. You'll be entering your questions in the Ask a Question section of the screen. Do that at any time. You can download Dr. Saline's slides right now by clicking the download the webinar slides in the Event Resources section. And if you want to learn more about Omega Bright, click on the tab just above the slides. Don't forget that audio issues are almost entirely always caused by slow internet connection, so if you could possibly have a wired internet browser, you will have a much better webinar experience. Now, finally, I want to talk to you about today. For the first time, at the request of so many of you, we are offering a certificate of attendance, which will be offered at the end of the webinar. You need to stay to the very end. And you will see a poll pop up at the end that'll ask you a couple of questions about the webinar. You'll need to take that poll, click submit, and wait until the webinar ends formally. You'll see the webinar is over. That will ensure that you'll receive an email certificate attached in your email that's personalized with your name and this date and this webinar. We're really happy about this, and we know many of you are as well. And we hope our first attempt to do this correctly technically works. So we'll come back to that at the end of the webinar. But if you do need a certificate of attendance, be sure to stay on until the end of the webinar when that poll and that experience will be offered. So, okay, with that, let me turn it over to Dr. Saline. With our thanks again for being here.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to do these webinars for Attitude and to share an experience with you, Susan. So first of all, what I'd like to start with is that to change any kind of ADHD behaviors, and it is really helpful to me for our question and answers later on, if you can write in about the age of your child and some of the challenges you're having at home, because I look forward to going forward into that part of the presentation and offering some concrete, helpful solutions to you. Today we're going to talk about how to change ADHD behaviors by focusing on your child's growth mindset. Now, I wrote a book that came out almost a year ago called What Your ADHD Child Wishes You Knew, as Susan said. And in this book, I interviewed dozens of kids, that would be children and teens and their parents, kids who'd come to therapy, kids who hadn't, about what their experience was like living with ADHD. And I spoke with their parents as well. And what I learned is that in order to really understand what it's like for kids, we have to talk to them. They are the experts on themselves. And so today we're going to talk about how we can do a dance between interventions that are based on emotional growth and behavioral change and sometimes medication, but include kids in the process, in the plans that we're making, because without their buy-in, we're not going to have success. So we need to help kids with ADHD your growth mindsets because they're actually very complex, and that leads them towards a fixed mindset. What is a fixed mindset? A fixed mindset is that when people believe that their base qualities, like their intelligence or their talent, are simply fixed traits. Everything is about the outcome, and those traits cannot be changed. In a growth mindset, which is what we're working towards, people pay equal, if not more, attention to their efforts. They have an underlying belief that their learning and attention can grow with time and experience. I am actually, excuse me one second. Okay, so how do we foster a growth mindset? And I just want to apologize. I'm navigating, changing the screen and some technical stuff over here. So if there's a little bit of a pause, I sincerely apologize. So I'm trying to get to the next screen. Okay, here we go. So how do we nurture and how do we foster a growth mindset? And this is where I'm going to propose what I call the 5 C's of ADHD parenting. And this is based on things kids told me. They want parents to manage themselves before they deal with their children. And we call that self-control. You manage your own feelings first so you can act effectively and teach your child with ADHD to do the same. It's like the instructions for the oxygen mask on an airplane. When you're on an airplane, they tell you to put the mask on yourself and then on your child. It's the same thing with self-regulation. If you're dysregulated or you're out of control, there's no way you're going to be able to get your child into a place of more and improved self-management. The second thing kids told me is they really want to be met where they are, not where you think they should be. And this is about compassion. It lies at the heart of a positive parent-child alliance, and it helps kids feel accepted for who they are. And they really need that sense from their parents because they get a lot of negative and critical feedback in the rest of the world. So it's got to start at home. The third C is collaboration. And what kids told me over and over again is they want to be included in these solutions or the plans that are geared to help them because they have some ideas about that. So you're going to work together with your child or teen or other important adults in their lives to find solutions to daily challenges instead of just imposing your goals and your rules and what you think is best. It's a dialogue. Ultimately, you as a parent have a final say. But if you include some piece of what matters to them, their participation is going to be much higher than if you don't. The fourth C is consistency. I know this is hard, but it's really important for these kids who struggle themselves with persistence and sticking with things for you to do what you say you're going to do. And you don't aim for perfection. In fact, what kids told me over and over again is they don't expect their parents to be perfect, but they do need a kind of steadiness. And that's important for them. We want to nurture their efforts to do their best. And we want to pay attention to the process, not always the outcome. And we want you to do that for yourselves as parents. And finally, the last C is celebration. And this means not baking a cake because your child cleared the table, but you're acknowledging what's working by continuously offering words and actions of encouragement, praise, and validation. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson wrote a book called Positivity, and she found that the best ratio is 3 positives for every negative. That is not what most kids with ADHD experience during the course of it. Work hard with specific and positive feedback to counteract negativity bias. Now, are we going to use those 5 C's? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to identify what triggers you about your child and sets them off. So what triggers you about your child? What triggers your child? So we want to identify a different 2 sets of triggers. Then together with your child, you want to sit down, have a conversation about these triggers and pick one behavior to work on to change. You're going to discuss these challenges, make a list of them. You can make a list of yours in advance. There's going to be some overlap. And then you're going to pick one that is on both lists, because if it matters to your child to change and you have a list and it matters to you, we want to start with something where they are invested, and then they'll feel a sense of success and momentum, and you can move on to other things. You're going to support their efforts by redirecting them when necessary and referring back to your mutually agreed upon plan. And you're going to hold that scaffolding in place to change these behaviors longer than you think. Often parents say to me, he should be able to do this by now. Why can't he do this by now? And they can't do it by now because, as you know, the ADHD brain, or brains of kids who are out-of-the-box thinkers, take longer to mature. Those frontal lobe connections to direct the rest of the brain can take up to 3 years in terms of to mature, to reach. I didn't say that quite right, so I'm going to reverse. They can be behind, there's a lag sometimes of about 3 years in their maturity compared to neurotypical peers. So we want to keep that in mind when we're looking at a child who looks like a fully grown adult at 17, but is actually in many ways with his executive functioning skills still 14. And you're going to reassess, you're going to reassess your action that you agreed on, the scaffolding and how it's working at a weekly meeting. You're going to celebrate accomplishments towards that meeting that goal, even if it's not fully completed. And when it is fully completed, you're going to notice that. The word for celebration the word that goes with celebration is noticing, and noticing positively. You're going to focus and rely on natural and logical consequences. So natural consequences are the inevitable result of a person's own actions. If you tell your daughter to wear a coat because it's cold and she doesn't, the consequence is that she's chilly. A logical consequence is the result of a person's action, but it's imposed by an adult or a caregiver. Logical consequences are best used when a child's action could result in harm to him or her. They have to be reasonable and related to the problem. You tell your son not to drive your car when you are away. He does and hits a stop sign. The logical consequence might be helping you pay for repairing the fender, driving only with you for a while, and using his bicycle to get places. Now, one of the greatest challenges, and I did a webinar, Attitude on Motivation, last year, is how do you motivate kids with ADHD to work on executive functions and just do stuff that has to get done. So when there's no clear immediate satisfaction or benefit, it's a struggle for kids with ADHD to do a task. And that has to do with the fact that their brains make less dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's directly related to having ADHD. And when it has to do with satisfaction and interest and pleasure. And when there's not enough dopamine in it, it's harder to muster your energy to do something you don't really like. So we have to set external incentives, sometimes called rewards or carrots, to encourage kids with ADHD to do things they don't like to do until the satisfaction of doing it internally and the internal reward. And this internal reward actually develops in late adolescence in the early 20s. And that's when it kicks in. And so we have to continue to use an external motivator until the internal motivation is really more established. The because I said so intimidation approach generation may get the job done. And in some moments of crisis or real time pressure, you may opt for that. But it doesn't teach lasting skills. And what kids with ADHD need are lasting skills. And so we want to create incentives that matter. Incentives are not bribes. You are holding out something that the child wants in exchange for something the child needs to do. A bribe is you give them what they want and then you ask them to do the task. And that's not what we're doing. You're going to write a bunch of these incentives down based on a conversation that you have with your child about things that motivate them. And you're going to keep changing them, because kids with ADHD get bored. Hold on one second. One of those technical moments, please. Oops, hold on. Okay, now let's talk about how we're going to work, what these executive functions are. Functioning skills are an essential aspect of how we function as adults. It's the way that we think about things. And as you can see, the executive functioning skills are divided into two basic categories. Hot skills, things we're really conscious of: inhibition, emotional control, organization, time management, planning, prioritizing, and initiation. And then cool skills, which are things that are a little more unconscious, that take a little more effort for us to be aware of, and also take a little more effort to learn. Energy, alertness, sustained attention. Am I on task? Am I not on task? What am I thinking about? Working memory. Can I recall really what I have to do and follow steps in a series? Shifting, flexibility. How do I move from one thing to another? Am I rigid? Is it hard for me to make changes or to go with the flow, or is it easy? And of course, we have goal-directed persistence and self-evaluation. And self-evaluation is also known as metacognition, and it's the last executive functioning skill to develop. It matures around the age of 25 in neurotypical brains. It's responsible for judgment and awareness of your behavior. And so we want to help kids with ADHD early on build this skill by asking questions, like teaching them to ask questions such as, how am I doing right now? Now, working memory is an essential aspect of executive functioning. It's like what we call the computational space in the brain. And it's a network of thoughts and perceptions of each moment and connect them to stored memories. And so it allows an individual to put experiences together to make sense of what's going on and how to act accordingly. Without it, a person lives in present time and can't make historical connections from even 5 minutes ago. Memory is deeply related to emotion. Emotion drives the energy of working memory. And it essentially what we want to think about when we're thinking about working memory is that it draws on past experiences to relate to our current situation or to project into the future. Now, let's get into the meat of it. How do we improve working memory? So the thing about working memory actually is this, we have to simplify and do one thing at a time. I had a client with ADHD. I'll call her Carly. She was 12. She said, Dr. Sharon, let me explain to you. I said, okay, here's how it works. It's like the file comes in my brain and the papers go everywhere. And then the next file comes in my brain and I'm still working on picking up the papers from the first file. And then the next file comes in and I'm still on the first file's papers. I get overwhelmed. And so we really need to think about, Carly, when we're working with kids with ADHD and asking them to do numerous things at a time or remember steps. It's a struggle for them. So we're going to start one thing at a time. And to remember that working memory has a small capacity. It's thought to hold only 4 or 5 elements of new information at a time. And for people with ADHD, it's more like 1 or 2. I like to teach the rule of 3 when giving directions to help build working memory. And it works like this. Step 1, you make eye contact with your child. Your eye on my eyes is what is helpful to say. And even for kids who are uncomfortable with eye contact, kids with ADHD who are also on the spectrum, may not be able to maintain eye contact, they at least make contact with you, look away, and then again, you bring their eyes back to you, so you are connecting with them. The second step is you tell the direction. And here's the third step, which is the most important. They repeat it back to you. And if they're not repeating it back to you in the way that you said it, you ask them again. Now, teenagers will push back with this. I'm not going to do this. This is stupid. And you're going to say, well, you know what? We've had some trouble with you following through with directions. So this is going to help your working memory. And I need to make sure that you get what I'm asking you to do. So the rule of 3 is a simple and effective way to build working memory skills. The other way to build working memory skills, and I really want you to think about this, is using Post-its. Post-its are a great reminder. If you're doing homework or you're working yourself and you leave your computer, you put a Post-it about what you were doing, so when you come back, you know where to go back to. This is useful for kids. Now, a couple other things to help with working memory: create doable routines. So routines foster working memory and develop planning and prioritizing skills, but they have to be written down. You want to be able to say to your kid, let's look back at the list, or what does the chart say, or supposed to do next. Check it out yourself, because you're going to teach them a kind of self-reliance, and you don't have to be a reminding machine, and they don't feel nagged. They're having some initiative to look at what they need to do next, and they can check off, or they can just follow the steps and get ready. Particularly in the morning, this has been found to be very useful by lots of families I've worked with. The other thing you want to do is to teach your kid to leave themselves notes. As I said before, these are prompts, and you can also do these for your child also. Texts, emails are great for reminders, and older kids can leave them for themselves using their own technology. Voice memos can be very helpful. Sometimes pictures work. I had a mom who at the beginning of the year would take a picture of her daughter fully dressed, ready for school, clothes, lunchbox, backpack, and she printed it out, put it on the refrigerator, and in the morning when things were crazy and she was racing around, the mother would say to the daughter, do you look like the picture? Check the picture. That'll tell you what to do next. We want to think in terms of prompting rather than reminding, and we want to use that terminology with our kids. So, emotional control. This is one I hear so much about. And to be honest, since everybody has executive functioning strengths and weaknesses, it's one of mine. I come from a long line of tense Jewish women, and I have big feelings. And so I know this one pretty well. And here's some things that have helped me and helped many of my kids. So the first thing when the big feelings are building up is that you have things down. Reactivity is related to stress and the amygdala hijack. And so the amygdala, if you don't know what they are 2 little organs in what we call the emotional brain, and they puff and they feel a sense of fear or stress. When there's a sense of stress or fight or flight, which is when they sort of developed, they take over. And what happens then is that your thinking brain, which is right here in the front of your brain, behind your forehead where the executive functioning skills reside, kind of goes on vacation. And Rex, age 11, described this for me so beautifully. He said, it's like a huge wave, a tidal wave. I'm doing fine, pow, suddenly I'm struggling to keep my head above water. And so we want to kind of help slow that wave down. And the one thing that's going to help slow that wave down is you. If you are responding, not reacting, because when you are triggered by your child's big feelings, big emotions, inappropriate behavior or words, you are basically taking kindling and throwing it on the burgeoning fire that is their emotions. So what I have taught many families is a method called stop, think, act. And actually kids use it and adults have used it. It works like this. Most people act, then they stop, then they think about it. We want to switch that around. We want a pause in the action when you notice that you're getting triggered. And that noticing will come from your body. These signals. I ask kids directly, how do you know when you're getting riled? Oh, okay, I get hot, I start to sweat, I clench my fists. Figure out what that is for your child, write it down. Figure out what that is for yourself. And then you're going to take a pause in the action when those things are coming. This is the toughest part. And I would sit down with your child and have a conversation. How are we going to call a stop? And what are we going to do during the stop? It takes a while for the body to kind of reset. It takes somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes for the stress response to calm down. So we want to figure out, what are you going to do during that stop? Do you want to be in the same room? Do you want to be in a separate room? I had worked with a family. They wanted to make calm me down boxes. And so when there was a stop, the boxes came out. Everybody sat in the same room and did their boxes. For you as an adult, I'm going to tell you my secret. Well, it's not going to be a secret because you're all going to hear it, but go to the bathroom. Kids understand that adults need to go to the bathroom. And in a moment, if you're at home or you're at a place where you can, go to the bathroom, wash your hands, look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can do this. I've done this before. Take some deep breaths. And then open the door. Whatever chaos is on the other side, you will have centered yourself a bit to deal with it. So when you're taking a pause, you have to ask yourself the question, what matters most right here, right now? Now, when we're using stop, think, act, what I just described is this time apart. So what are you going to do during your stop? You're going to help identify what soothes people when they're stressed, okay? And you're going to talk about what is next. So when it's time to come back together, when things have calmed down after about 15 minutes or so, you come back together and you're going to decide what to do, what the next part of the, sorry, my screen is acting a little bit funny. I apologize. So you're going to decide what the next thing to do is. The thing that the most important point here is that you have to plan for the triggers, not necessarily each thing that's going to set your child off, but the process of being triggered and over responding to something. That's what you're working on. So in a calm moment, you're going to sit down and talk about the blow up process and what helps calm you down, write them down, how you're going to call the stop, what you're going to do during the stop, or what we call time apart, and how you're going to come back together. Now, the best way to engage the think is through language. We're going to talk calmly about a situation afterwards. You're going to ask open-ended questions, state what you've observed, and talk about your experience appropriate. And you're going to do one thing, which is you're going to avoid blaming and analyzing. You're going to say things like, I hear, I noticed. And then you're going to talk about what should happen next. What is the next thing that we should do? Keep things simple, discuss what the next step is, and then go ahead and take that step. That's the act part. That's the action. You're going to move into that right away. Okay. Now, how so we've talked about work memory. We've talked about emotional control, and I'm sure we'll have questions about both of those. Let's just talk for a little bit about initiation, getting started. This is one of my favorite topics. The key to getting started on anything for kids with ADHD is making the task a doable size. So what procrastination is a response to is feeling overwhelmed by the size of a task as well as the parts of the task. So we want to break a task down into smaller, achievable parts, and no size is too small. You are going to notice and reward their efforts and successes with praise and positive feedback. It's good to have a daily guideline of what to do when you get stuck, when you can't get started, and maybe set some notations on that. In fact, many kids with ADHD tell me, particularly teens, that they need a fire under them to get started. Marcello, age 15, said, I'm the best procrastinator ever. I push everything on the last minute. If I had an essay due Friday, I'll do it Thursday o'clock in the morning. Just lazy, kind of. I work better under pressure because it puts me under me. Says, hey, don't feel bad about the procrastination thing. Your mom and I do the same thing. How do we address procrastination? We use incentives that matter. Now, incentives that matter are also, I know I switched slides, I apologize. Incentives that matter are incentives that mean something to your kids, not what you think that they should. They aren't a trip to buy the latest toy either. Incentives that matter have to do with time or activities that matter to kids. And often it's screens, and if there's some questions about that, we can talk about that a little later. But we want to use something that matters to them to get them to start on something that seems unappealing. Organization. We want to start any organizing process with what makes sense to kids. I call these self-smart systems. For one girl, it might be color coding her subjects in her notebook at school. For someone else, it might be putting their sports equipment in the order of their favorite sports first and their least favorite sports at the bottom. For one girl I worked with, she wanted to take her clothes out of her drawers and put them on a bookshelf, because one of the issues that she was having with mom was that she pulled her clothes out of her drawers and they would be all over the floor. And her mom basically said, no, you can't put your clothes it would look at. So we did a bunch of therapy around that. And ultimately she put her clothes on her shelves because you could see them. That was the issue for her. I can't see my clothes in my drawers. When the clothes were on the shelves, her room was 75% cleaner. So we want to have a conversation with kids about what makes sense to them. And we want to have a list for organizational steps to guide them, rather than expecting them to go to their room and pick up everything from the floor and put things away. They might need some steps to guide them in cleaning their room. This would help them improve prioritizing and sequencing. You may also need to be part of this process, of course. And the reason that you may need to be part of this process, and probably you will be part of this process, is because you have to teach organizing skills, and you have to know that you're going to give extra time for organizing. Last minute rushes are only going to result in frustration for everyone. So when we're organizing, we're going to basically meet your child where they are in terms of their capabilities for organizing, clarify what they can do on their own and what they need assistance with, and what they might need full support for. Talk with your child about those things. You're going to create routines for organization. I like an evening sweep is always a great thing to do. Everybody goes to the house, picks up 3 things that are theirs and puts them where they belong. You could have a room cleanup list, and of course, Post-its for reminders, a picture of what clean looks like. You want to gamify the organizational process. Make it fun. Turn music on. Make it a race. Who can pick up the most things from the floor in 1 minute? Little competitions like that. These keep kids engaged and motivated to actually do the task. And it's really important that you remember that it's extremely hard for kids with ADHD to do something they don't enjoy, like prioritizing, sorting, putting things away, and they'll get distracted in the process. And that's when you might want to consider being a body double. You're in the room, maybe you're the folder and your child is the clothes picker-upper, but you're there guiding them around. And I know you're thinking that's about the last thing you want to do with all your free time, but our goal is teaching skills. And so if you need to be there for some of that, I don't think there's any way around it. Now, how do we have collaborative conversations? This is the key to all of these skills. You're going to pick a calm moment when you can talk, and you're going to essentially discuss neutrally what the task is, what happens before, during, and after a situation, and what strategy you want to use. You're going to use reflective listening and say, I heard you say X. So you're going to state our observations and ask for theirs. You're going to brainstorm with the goal of including at least ideas in any of the plans that you're making for organization, initiation, memory, emotional control. All ideas are fair game when you brainstorm, and then you're going to whittle those ideas down. It's critical that you reflect on a time with a pot that is similar to this situation. It doesn't have to have be exactly the same, but it's similar and it had a positive outcome. And talk about how you could apply some of the things, the tools that were used in that situation to this current one. Or you look at another task, a chore that you did that went well. Why? What happened? How did you contribute? What made it work? And then you're going to write down the elements of your new plan and predict that there could be some struggles and discuss some alternatives. In a week, you're going to meet again and check in. I think it's really important when you're parenting kids with ADHD, a weekly check-in. This way you can kind of keep a list of some of the issues. They can keep a list of some of the issues. If they're younger kids, they may not have a list, but that's okay. They'll come down, they'll sit down with you, they'll come up with an idea. But then you know that there's a time where things are going to be discussed instead of that constant feedback, redirection, what kids perceive as a steady stream of negativity. You can make these changes. It's very important that you rely on meaningful incentives and change them, that you rely on your own self-control. Nothing useful can happen when everyone is hot and bothered. And if you continue to argue without behavioral changes, then the plan isn't working and you need to renegotiate it. If your child is not cooperating, then the plan needs to be renegotiated. Your child is showing you that it's not effective and there's something blocking them from doing it. We need to put on our Sherlock Holmes hats and figure out what that is. You're going to model trial and error learning by regrouping without blame. You can feel frustrated and you can say you're frustrated. That's very different than losing your temper and screaming at a child. And you want to remind your kids that this makes progress. We're not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress. And finally, you're going to use a skill deficit model, not a failure of will. Executive functioning skills take until the mid to late 20s to develop in kids with ADHD. So buckle up. It's a longish ride, but you can do it. Finally, I just want to remind you to nurture a growth mindset. The batting average is people strike out at the bat 2 out of 3 times. So we're going to keep practicing. We're going to avoid shaming kids. Basically, people make mistakes, and that's how they learn, and reminding them of that. And finally, effective praise also states the value of accomplishment. So you notice hard work, and you say things like, I really like how you are working on. Good luck, and I look forward to our questions.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was great. And there are lots of questions. So I'm sure we've talked about this one before, but let me bring it up again. Can you suggest some rewards? I think parents have a tough time coming up with something that doesn't seem like bribery, so something that's the right sort of scale for the issue at hand. Can you give some examples of reward systems that you've seen to be effective, found to be effective with your patients, clients, families?
Of course, this is one of the hardest things for parents, so I'm so glad we're addressing this issue. Most of the today want one thing for their rewards: technology. And the technology train is off and running. I think technology can be useful, but it has to be used in a specific way, and I'm going to briefly describe that. In my book, I talk about a method called easy on, easy off. And essentially what that means is that you decide how much technology you would like your child to have every day. And I'm just going to use a low number for the sake of easy math and time. So let's say it's an hour a day. Your child automatically will get 30 minutes every single day, no matter how they behave, except if they use the technology inappropriately, going to porn sites, bullying people online, etc. But generally, they get their half hour of screen time. Then the second half hour is the carrot. And you use the second half hour to get them to do things that they need to do. So that's, and then the way it works is if they get off the screen for the first 30 minutes without arguing, they earn the privilege of the second, of having the, they earn the privilege of the second thing into play. And if they don't get it. The other thing that I think is great reward is for younger kids, it's time with you. And actually that's even true for teenagers. Pick a TV show that you're going to watch and start from the beginning. I know one family, their reward was Parks and Rec. And then if they did not earn the Parks and if they didn't cooperate to earn the Parks and Rec, they got a different kind of family time, which was chore time. So either way, it was time with you. It's just that sometimes it was things kids like to do. Some kids like to play games, puzzles, cards, sports activities, something that they enjoy that would be an extra on top of what they already do. If they already get 2 stories at night, they can get 3 or 4. If they already if they already had their basketball game and they have complete homework on time, and the thing that they want to do is shoot some hoops with you, shoot some hoops. One of the challenges for kids with ADHD is when they stop doing something, they don't always know what to do next. The rewards are brainstormed with the kids, and sometimes kids want to earn points towards a purchased item. That's up to you.
Okay, helpful, thank you. Clarification question. What did you mean by prompting instead of reminding or nagging? This is, I think, a big part of your overall collaboration framework. And so perhaps you could clarify or give us more information on that process where something becomes a prompt instead of a nag or a reminder.
So the difference is, for example, saying shoes versus why aren't your shoes on? Or room versus your room is so that you make an agreement with your child. What is prompting language versus nagging language? And then you decide, is that something that you can do? Is that something that makes sense? Most kids can respond to a 1 or 2 word prompt versus a longer set of sentences and phrases about what they should be doing, why they should be doing it, and why aren't they doing it. And I think that's a real difference, that we're going to talk with, say, okay, I need to prompt you because you need cueing. That's part of having an ADHD brain. So what kinds of cues are going to feel like cues versus things that feel like nagging? And, sometimes parents, you're going to have to, you will nag, but it's nice to start the process with something a little more positive and less onerous.
Okay.
I also
I'm going to give you.
that,
Sure.
I was going to say, I was going to say Post-its can be good. So you put a Post-it on the door, today is room cleaning day. Rather than, and if the room, and some kids might prefer that.
So I think this is a great suggestion, and it revolves around having as you've talked about, having an agreed upon plan in advance. And I think, so I'm wondering what age is best for starting this kind of collaboration. Some of the listeners have teenagers. They feel like maybe they've missed the window in terms of agreeing to a plan. How would you characterize this process of coming up with a collaborative plan that would then allow you to prompt instead of nag, in terms of the age and the conversations?
I think you can start at 5 and you can keep going. You're not too old to do this. Teenager doesn't like the tension in the house. Your teenager doesn't like conflicts with you as much as you don't like conflicts with them. And that is your in is to sit down and say, you know what? I know we're arguing so much about how you don't like, how you leave your dishes all around the kitchen. And it's not really working for me. Is it working for you? And the answer is going to be no. And then we can have a conversation. So I'd start from this compassionate place of we aren't connecting here in a positive way. How can we do this differently? And your teenager may not know the answer, but that's where your adult brain comes in and says, well, I've observed X, and I noticed that it goes better when we do Y. What do you think about that? And they may be sort of surly or disengaged, but I have yet to meet a teenager who wants to spend time arguing with the parents.
Here's a comment that's an interesting one. Kimberly says, my son absolutely refuses to use checklists. He insists that he can remember it. He doesn't need it. And it's an argument every single time. And in a similar vein with a much younger child, I think this is interesting. So that's a teen. Another person says, I give my young child a three-item list, things that she can get done in 15 minutes or less, and she's still overwhelmed. So I guess both these cases to me are sort of like lists or checklists. How does a parent best handle that kind of list of items to be done, regardless of the age of the child?
It's so funny because, of course, it's so funny because I've had this conversation with Peg Dawson, and I said, well, have you ever thought, is there any way around organizing this with that list? And she said, no. And so the challenge is, how do you get kids to buy in? I mean, so I think that for the younger child, if there's 3 things on the list and they're overwhelmed, maybe the list only should have 1 thing, and that would be a Post-it. Here's the item. And then the next item is another Post-it. For teenagers who don't like lists, I would actually sit down with them and have a conversation. And this conversation would look something like this. I know you hate lists. I respect that. But you're not getting stuff done. And lists are really the only way to organize things. So what kind of lists could you actually tolerate? Is it a list of Post-its? Like, I have one client who doesn't like lists, but she can tolerate 5 Post-its in a row. I don't know why, but she can. Would it be something where you set verbal cues, verbal alerts on your phone? So when I say verbal alerts, what I mean is auditory alerts, something where you get a reminder and it tells you the thing that you have to do. There aren't a lot of ways around lists. That for teens who don't like lists, what they've told me is that they feel constrained, like they don't like the structure, like they're supposed to do this and then this. Maybe the list is more circular, like here are things that need to be done. This is a reminder for you. I think it's really important to talk about why your son hates lists. What is it about them that he doesn't like? And the flip side is, how do you get stuff done without them? Because he's not getting stuff done. And so that's really the catch-22. So here's stuff you have to do to do it more effectively. you're choosing not to do it that way, which causes us arguments. I don't think that's working. The goal here is doing more of what works and less of what doesn't.
Okay. Talking with your child about ADHD and which is a big part of what you're describing, having really honest conversations with your child. At what age and how do you suggest parents start to talk with their children about what it means to have attention deficit disorder or another disability?
Well, I think that for younger kids, it's important that people understand what kind of brains they have. And I don't tend to use the words ADHD with younger kids. I follow the lead of the parents. What I'm more interested in is how kids conceive of their own brains. Do I have a fast brain? Do I have a dreamy brain? Do I have a foggy brain? Do I have a bullet brain? These are all terms that kids have told me is how they think about their brain. And these are kids who are 6 and kids who are 16. And so the question is, what kind of brain do you have? And how do you want to relate to that brain? And to normalize that, we all have different kinds of brains. We all have strengths and challenges. I shared one of mine. But when you share with the child, I struggle with being organized too. And so I understand that, it's not fun to pick up. But when it's over, we can do something fun. For a younger child, I think it's important for them to understand something about how their brain works with that doesn't pathologize it. Okay. And so what that means then is we're going to focus on the executive functioning skills and the behaviors rather than the label.
Okay. So there are, I would say, this will not surprise you, 30 questions about the morning hours, getting out of the house on time. We all know what that's like. We once did a very funny poll about that with our readers, and their comments were, they were pretty amazing. Do you have any strategies for parents who have a really tough time getting their child to get up on time, getting them to do the basics that they need to do before they get out the door? Stephanie says, I give my son a schedule. We agree on it. I still have to remind him every single morning of each item on the list.
Well, then Stephanie, what he's showing you is that he is not able yet to retain the steps on the list on his own. And that is frustrating. And that kind of leads to an issue of the scaffolding that you're providing. And I will get to the routines, but you as parents of kids with ADHD are providing the scaffolding for longer than you think and more scaffolding than you would like. And so, morning routines are tricky for everybody because there is a deadline at the other side. I have to be at school by a certain time. I need to be at work by a certain time. And so I think the most important thing is how your child would be motivated and what your child can handle on their own and what they can't. I worked with a family who basically their kids would get up. They'd have to wait. They set an alarm. They set 2 alarms, one next to them, one across the room. The adult would still have to go in the room to wake them. Then they would go downstairs, eat their breakfast, and then back upstairs to get dressed and brush their teeth. That routine was ineffectual. And the reason it was ineffectual because everyone had to do everything upstairs together and then all go downstairs together. And so if it means you brush your teeth with your child, you do that. If you sleep in your clothes, like some kids I know actually go take their bath, get dressed in their clothes for the next day, and go to sleep in those clothes. They're clean, and it makes the morning easier. So, I think we have to take out all of the conceptualizations of how things are supposed to be and be open to thinking in different categories. Maybe the toothbrush lives in the kitchen, near the kitchen sink, so the toothbrushing happens after breakfast and you can see it. Maybe dressing happens downstairs also. Like it just, I've seen it all. Like I had one kid who went up and had breakfast and brushed his teeth, was allowed 10 minutes of TV every day while he got dressed. That was what the mom said. Or when kids were fully dressed and ready for school, they were allowed to do something they enjoyed. Maybe they had a bunny, played with the bunny, or they would get hugs. One family was like, well, ready for school, you can have hugs, as you can do in 1 minute. And one of the little girls said, I didn't know there were so many types of hugs. I mean, I was surprised that was their choice, but whatever. So we want to figure out what the routine is. It's important to have the steps posted somewhere in the kitchen and in the bedroom so that they can follow it and prepare that you will be the perimeter. You're just, it's time to get dressed, or start with, whatever it is. If your child still needs reminders, they're showing you that they haven't been able to metabolize the routine yet. It will come, I promise. It just takes more practice.
Okay. Can you just briefly go through your rule of 3 again? That was interesting to listeners.
Sure. So the rule of 3, you get down on your child's level, you make eye contact, your eyes on my. Sometimes it helps to put a hand on their shoulder to just make that connection. That's 1. 2, you speak your direction. 3, they repeat direction back to you. And if what they tell you is not what you said, you speak it again until you hear it back to you the way it needs to go. So one of the reason the rule of 3 works is A, there's contact, so you have their attention. B, you're giving the information in an auditory channel as well as in a visual channel. They're looking at you and they're receiving the information. Then C, they have somehow absorbed that information enough in their working memory, repeat it back to you. So now it's being transferred down the line in the memory function. So it's held on to. We need them to speak it because language is a way that they can kind of solidify and hold on to it.
Okay. That's great. We are going to have to stop. For those of you who would like a certificate of attendance, please do not leave the webinar. I will be telling you shortly what you need to do for that. Sharon, thank you so much for this. And everyone, I really recommend Sharon's book for lots more on this really interesting and positive way to relate to your children. So thank you so much. Our upcoming webinars this Thursday in 2 days on medication, a second webinar. We had Dr. Tom Brown last week, who gave a wonderful presentation. This is all in around the theme of how do we optimize medications? We know what they are, but getting it right is hard. And then next Thursday, helping children with ADHD overcome failure and fear and disappointment without, really taking it so much to heart. So those are both really interesting, and I hope you'll join us for those. For those of you who'd like to have a certificate of attendance, stay on. You'll see the certificate appear in your screen. It's important for you to complete the survey, submit it, and stay on until the end of the webinar, at the very end of the webinar, when we close the webinar, for you still to be present, so that the system will recognize that you are waiting for your certificate to be emailed to you. So I'm going to let you have some time to take this certification test. And anyone else, thanks again for attending. We can always give Attitude a review on iTunes. All of our webinars are there as podcasts. We recommend them. We've had millions of downloads that have been helpful to so many people. And of course, we also think you might be interested in subscribing to Attitude Magazine. I think you might enjoy reading it. If you enjoy our podcast, the link is on our website. And while you're taking the survey, I will just now, I think, end the webinar. I think is that enough time to take the survey, perhaps? Yes, it's ended. So thank you, everyone. And let's hope this survey works. Let us know if it doesn't. Write to customer service@attitudemag.com.